Good evening, my friends. The Philadelphia Eagles may have quietly made one of the most fascinating draft selections in recent franchise history, and the more details that continue to emerge, the more impressive this story becomes. When Philadelphia used the 251st overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft on UR Bernard, many fans immediately viewed it as a developmental project. After all, we're talking about a player who had never actually played organized football before arriving through the NFL's International Player Pathway program. On the surface, it looked like a long-term gamble, but the deeper you look into what the Eagles saw, the more you begin to understand why this organization was willing to invest one of its final draft selections in a player who remains one of the biggest mysteries from the entire draft class. The reality is that UR Bernard is not being talked about because of what he has already accomplished on a football field. He's being talked about because of what he could potentially become. Standing 6'4" and weighing 306 pounds, Bernard possesses athletic traits that almost seem impossible when you look at the numbers. During athletic testing, he posted a 4.63 second 40-yard dash while weighing over 300 pounds. He also recorded 31 repetitions on the bench press at 225 pounds, a 39-inch vertical jump, and a broad jump that exceeded 10 feet. Those are not normal measurements for a defensive lineman. In fact, they are numbers that compare favorably with some of the greatest athletic prospects the NFL has ever seen. What makes this even more remarkable is that Bernard achieved those results without years of football training behind him. Most players spend their entire lives preparing for those moments. Bernard was still learning the fundamentals of the game while producing athletic numbers that immediately caught the attention of NFL evaluators. The Eagles have always believed in taking calculated risks when the upside is significant enough. That's exactly why this selection fits so perfectly with the philosophy established by Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman over the years. Philadelphia has never been afraid to think differently. They have consistently looked for opportunities where other organizations may hesitate, and according to information that surfaced from inside the Eagles draft room, there was a very strong internal push to bring Bernard to Philadelphia. Defensive line coach Clint Hurt reportedly became one of Bernard's biggest advocates during the draft process. Before day 3 of the draft began, Hurt stood in front of key decision makers and delivered a passionate endorsement of a player who had never played football. That's not something coaches do lightly. Hurt reportedly told the organization that Bernard possessed more physical talent than some players selected during the first 2 days of the draft. That is an enormous statement when you consider the caliber of prospects typically chosen in the early rounds. Even more importantly, Hurt wasn't simply evaluating athletic ability, he was evaluating the person behind the athlete. As the Eagles dug deeper into Bernard's background, they discovered qualities that became just as important as his rare physical gifts: work ethic, character, discipline, a willingness to learn. Those traits quickly became major factors in Philadelphia's decision-making process. One story from the pre-draft process perfectly illustrates why the Eagles became so intrigued. During a scheduled workout with the team, Bernard arrived long before he needed to. By the time coaches were ready to begin evaluating him, he was already fully engaged in his preparation. He was sweating, working, and making sure he maximized every moment of the opportunity. What stood out even more was how he responded to mistakes. Whenever he failed to execute something correctly, he immediately wanted another repetition. He wanted to learn. He wanted to improve. He wanted to do it again until he got it right. For a player attempting to learn one of the most complex sports in the world from the ground up, that mentality may be just as valuable as any measurable athletic trait. The Eagles understand that Bernard remains extremely raw. Nobody inside the organization expects instant results. In fact, there has been a consistent message from those working with him: patience will be required. Development will not happen overnight. There will be mistakes. There will be growing pains. There will be a long learning curve. But Philadelphia believes the foundation is there. One reason the Eagles can afford to be patient is because Bernard entered the organization through the International Player Pathway program. That creates roster flexibility while allowing the coaching staff to dedicate significant developmental resources to him. Essentially, Philadelphia gains additional time to work with one of the most intriguing athletic projects in football. And perhaps the most interesting part of this entire story is the comparison that many fans have already started making: Jordan Mailata. The parallels are impossible to ignore. Back in 2018, the Eagles used a 7th round pick on a rugby player from Australia who had never played football. Many people questioned the decision. Few imagined what would eventually happen. Today, Mailata has developed into one of the premier offensive tackles in the NFL, earning recognition as one of the best players at his position. Now, Philadelphia is attempting something similar again. No one is claiming Bernard will become the next Jordan Mailata, Mailata. That would be unfair and unrealistic at this stage, but the Eagles have already proven that they possess one of the league's best developmental environments for unique international prospects. And that's where this story becomes truly fascinating, because if Bernard's athletic ability is as special as the numbers suggest, and if his work ethic is as strong as coaches continue to describe, then the Eagles may have uncovered another extraordinary long-term project that could eventually surprise the entire league. The early reviews from within the building have been extremely encouraging. Coaches love his attitude. Teammates have noticed his physical gifts. The organization appears fully committed to investing time into his development. The question now becomes whether all of those ingredients can eventually come together on the football field. Can the Eagles turn one of the most inexperienced players in professional football into a legitimate NFL contributor, just as they once did with Jordan Mailata? What do you think, Eagles fans? Is Ugo Amadi Bernard the next incredible developmental success story in Philadelphia? Or is it still too early to believe this 7th-round gamble can become something special? The excitement surrounding Bernard's future only continued to grow when some of the most respected voices inside the Eagles organization began sharing their impressions of him, and perhaps no endorsement carries more weight than one coming from Jordan Mailata himself. Mailata understands better than anyone what Bernard is experiencing right now. He knows what it's like to enter the NFL without a football background. He knows what it feels like to learn terminology, techniques, positioning, and countless details that most players have spent years mastering. Most importantly, he knows how difficult the journey can be. That's why his comments immediately caught the attention of Eagles fans. According to Mailata, Bernard possesses physical traits that are almost impossible to describe. He referred to him as a freak athlete, someone whose strength and speed simply stand out whenever he is on the field. In fact, Mailata went as far as saying that he couldn't even compare Bernard's athletic profile to his own because of how unique the young defensive lineman appears to be. Think about that for a moment. We're talking about Jordan Mailata, a player who is widely considered one of the most physically gifted offensive tackles in football. Yet even he was amazed by what he saw from Bernard. Of course, athletic ability alone does not guarantee NFL success. History is filled with incredible athletes who never developed into great football players. The Eagles know that. Bernard knows that. Everyone involved understands that the challenge ahead is enormous. The encouraging part is that nobody inside the organization appears to be rushing the process. Clint Hurt has repeatedly emphasized that patience will be necessary. Bernard is learning a completely new sport while competing against some of the best athletes in the world. There are no shortcuts. Every practice becomes a classroom. Every meeting becomes a learning opportunity. Every drill helps build a foundation that many NFL players began developing during childhood. Yet despite those challenges, reports suggest that Bernard is progressing exactly the way the Eagles hoped he would. He's working hard, he's embracing coaching, he's earning the respect of teammates, and perhaps most importantly, he is showing a willingness to attack every challenge that comes his way. That mindset is critical because the road ahead will not be easy. Learning how to use his hands consistently, understanding leverage, developing pass rush moves, improving lateral movement and short area quickness, recognizing offensive schemes, diagnosing blocking assignments. All of those areas will require significant development before Bernard can realistically contribute at the NFL level. But that's precisely why the Eagles viewed this as such an intriguing opportunity. When most teams reach the late rounds of the draft, they often select players whose ceilings are already fairly well defined. The player may have experience, but limited upside. Philadelphia decided to take a different approach. Instead of drafting a player who might already be close to his maximum potential, they selected someone whose football journey is only beginning. That's what makes this such a fascinating long-term investment. If Bernard develops even a fraction of the skills necessary to match his extraordinary athletic profile, the Eagles could end up with a player whose value far exceeds where he was selected. That's the dream scenario. It's exactly why organizations occasionally take chances on prospects who don't fit traditional scouting models. And let's be honest, few organizations have earned more credibility in this area than Philadelphia. The success story of Jordan Mailata changed the way many people view developmental prospects. It proved that under the right circumstances, with the right coaching staff and the right player commitment, remarkable transformations can happen. That doesn't mean Bernard's path will be identical. In fact, expecting another Mailata story would be unfair. What Mailata accomplished is extraordinarily rare, but what it does mean is that Bernard has landed in one of the best possible environments to maximize his chances of success. The Eagles have the infrastructure. They have experienced coaches, they have veteran leadership, they have a culture that values development. And they have a front office willing to remain patient with long-term projects. When you combine all of those factors with Bernard's physical tools and reputation for relentless work ethic, it's easy to understand why there is growing excitement around his future. Now the focus shifts to what comes next. Every preseason snap will be watched closely. Every training camp report will generate interest. Every update from coaches will be analyzed. Fans will want to know whether Bernard is taking the next step, whether he's adapting to the speed of the game, and whether those incredible athletic traits are beginning to translate into actual football production. Because if they do, the Eagles may once again find themselves celebrating one of the most remarkable developmental stories in the NFL. For now, though, the organization appears committed to a patient and disciplined approach. No unrealistic expectations, no unnecessary pressure. Just steady development and a belief that extraordinary talent combined with extraordinary work ethic can eventually produce extraordinary results. And that's what makes this story so compelling. The outcome remains unknown, but the potential is impossible to ignore. If Bernard continues progressing behind the scenes and starts putting all of these pieces together, could the Eagles have discovered another hidden gem who eventually shocks the entire NFL and validates one of the boldest draft decisions of the 2026 class? One detail that should not be overlooked throughout this entire story is how much confidence the Eagles coaching staff appears to have in their ability to develop Bernard over the coming years. This wasn't a situation where Philadelphia simply saw an athletic prospect and decided to take a random chance. The organization conducted extensive evaluations, gathered feedback from multiple sources, and ultimately reached the conclusion that Bernard was worth investing valuable draft capital in despite his lack of football experience. That level of organizational belief is significant. When draft selections are made, especially on day 3, there are often differing opinions inside the building. Scouts may prefer one player, while coaches favor another. Sometimes the front office leans toward production, while coaches lean toward upside. In Bernard's case, however, the information that has emerged suggests there was genuine enthusiasm from key